Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and as is my new habit, I'm checking in on Wednesday to say hello to people and get you up to speed on what I'm doing next. Some people would like to check in and see what I'm doing next. And I have been so busy all day that I wasn't able to check in earlier. So looking like I've got 50 minutes or so before going about my business. But I've got some stuff that I need to bring onto my regular computer. Let's see, here's my upcoming. I try to make sure the chat window works just in case anybody says anything. It's been known to happen before. I think last time I was like, is it even working? And begged people to chime in, and they eventually did. So here's what we're looking at. I've got some new stuff coming, and this coming weekend I've been sort of bending heaven and earth to make sure that I can bring Galactic 3 because there's a bug fix for Galactic 2. We've got some other things that you're not going to see for a while. That's because I'm primarily interested in putting out Galactic 3, but some of this stuff it's for me. I would like to resume doing the Haglopus hystericus. I'd like to resume doing the posting music. But what I've found is that as I continue to and I have a little more to do here. Unfortunately, I don't know how convenient it's going to be to do that. Probably not for right now, so I'm just going to have to make a little note for myself that the Raspberry Pi are not done yet. Raspberry Pi not done. I thought I had everything caught up. I've been real busy this morning. A bunch of stuff going on. And let's see now. Okay, I haven't dragged those over yet, so I got to do it like this. And as you can see, with Galactic, I'm ready to do the Raspberry Pi stuff, but oh dear. I think I done screwed up. Tell you what. Oh. No, it's saving my butt. See, it says an item already exists. Do I want to replace it? Oh, hell no. Goodness no. See, these Linux plugins are 74 and 82K. But these are 95 and 103K because these are the PC ones and these are the Raspberry Pi ones. These need to not go into this place. Okay. Upcoming. Here's where they go. Boy, it's been quite a day, I gotta say. And then the next thing is drag some of these over to here. And then probably I'll do some more of my analyzing of hit records because you can see the most recent version of the hit record collection. But here's the thing, like I'm doing that and certain things are not registering as well as I think they should. In particular, I know that the 80s Genesis tracks, like the big hits like Misunderstanding or Man on the Corner, those are extraordinary, but they are so freaking dynamic that you can hardly translate them. I need to come up with a mastering toolkit that I can use that'll work with that stuff. And I don't as yet have that, but I'm working on it. And this is me trying to open a folder and failing over and over and over and over and over again. But no worries, it got there. And I need to move all of these things into their relevant places, and then I need to build the signed versions of the Mac AUs and VSTs, which I'm not going to be able to do today because I'm going to run out of time. But maybe tomorrow or the next day. And I gotta do it for the Galactic 3. I have already done the bug fix for Consolidated for Galactic 2, by the way. Turns out there was a bug with it where there was an uninitialized, or 4 uninitialized variables, and somebody pointed them out, so I scrambled and fixed it. So let's see. So here's what we're looking to get to. And I do not have the most recent ones yet. Most recent ones are a plugin called Zoom and a plugin called Mastering, and that's going to be very interesting for people. I'm not going to post that right away, and I'll tell you why not. Nobody's going to be able to relate to it. It's for what I need to do, because I need to be able to run these songs, and I'll show you in a minute that I'm running into the hit record meter and optimize them so that they'll perform without sounding distinctly different from what they're currently sounding like. So let's see. First thing, we copy this over without removing it from the original place. We can move the Galactic 3 into the source folder. But I still need to do the Raspberry Pi version, so I can't move the other ones. However, everything else I have done in all the different variations of it. So here's where we're at now. This is how this works. I have to do this every week, so you're going to just have to sit there with me while I do it. First, we move these to Mac AU. Then I command move them to Mac signed AU. And I'm going to have to update those, so I'm going to make another note for myself. Those need to be made into signed plugins, and same for these. Drag over to Mac VST, and then command drag them over to Mac signed VST, and those are going to need to be updated. Hello, before. Hey, Evan. And lastly, the Windows version, which may or may not be the one that all the other stuff is based on, like Consolidated and so forth. I am not entirely sure. And that's just a direct move into this new location. And so now I have the Linux versions to do. We'll do the courtesy of not starting that while actually on stream. Instead, I'll play with some other stuff, and I'll start it as soon as I get off stream, which I'll do promptly at 5, because I do have dinner, even though it's not tacos on Wednesday. And we're gonna eject my little SD card that I use for shuffling all this stuff around to a bunch of computers, many of which have no internet access. We'll get there. That's the best I can tell you, is we'll get there. Here's what I'm doing at the moment. How I'm building the individual Windows plugins is unlike how Consolidated is built on GitHub. I am running a virtual machine that has no contact with the outside world, and it's like an old Windows 8 or something. And I just move stuff over on the SD card and build it there, and then move all the bits back. So I have a virtual Windows computer that runs on actually the retro laptop, so that's kind of funny. And the retro laptop doesn't have internet access, so it's sort of doubly airwalled. So here's what I have been doing also today whilst doing all of that. Here is the hit record meter. And I can put content hide on. And what I've been doing is measuring and measuring and measuring. So I can run this. It is Bowie's Young Americans. And it's giving me a rating, but there's a lot of this stuff. Like, this is off of old vinyl records. I'd like to be able to post these things to YouTube, but have them shown off properly. There's a lot of them, like some of the old Genesis is very dark. A bunch of this stuff can be very dark, or it can be more dynamic than it needs to be. Like, look at this. We have peaks up on the top here, and the hottest peaks are like a solid 3 dB over everything else just about. Like, you don't have to preserve peaks to the extent that there isn't a peak up at 0 for the duration of a minute. Like, you don't have to have that much dynamic range. You need to use the range effectively. So the plugin that I've done, which is called Zoom, it's a variation between a version of density and something else I came up with, where you can boost it and it will shift the body of all these peaks upwards towards the top, leaving the top one still unclipped. It's a soft clip. Density does that. And then you can also move them in the opposite direction. Like, if you have a really tight cluster that's all like in here, you can expand them out a little bit, although it doesn't work terribly well. But it's, it's worth a try. And I've got a 4-band version of Stonefire, which turned very weird because the bass band came out inverted. Like, I would boost it and it would cut. And I had to swap the polarity of the control to get that to work. And I have another neat trick, which turns out to be related to the plugin Senu. Senu kind of got past people. It's mostly been observed as a cranking things up and making them super loud. But one reason it might have got past people is because it reacts poorly to being overdriven. It will be, yeah. Yeah. Zoom will make stuff seem to be closer or farther away without changing the dynamics of it that much. It's a little bit like density, except for that density pretty much boosts specifically to make stuff loud, and when it cuts, it makes stuff really quiet. Zoom does the same thing with multiple stages of boost available to it as well. But when you cut, it is also gain staged, so that as it cuts, the peaks get hotter and louder at the same time. And the overall loudness doesn't seem to change all that terribly much. Then as I'm getting over to talking about Senu, that's a very, very simple, like I'll show you what the code is for that. I was surprised when I found it, because I was like, I didn't remember this being this simple. Senu. Here's the code. It's this big. That is the code for Senu. That's how big it is. And yet it makes this crazy, roaring, overwhelming sound. But parts of it got past me. And I only realized what it was doing when I was running a meter. And I'll show you in a moment once I'm finished with this. I think this is bright enough to show properly. Little David Bowie there. That's what that bit looked like. Note that the vocalization there is blue, red, blue, green, blue, purple, red, the color of these things has significance in that a lot of stuff, you'll also find this in Prince. Prince's vocalizations are often purple in color, which is perfect. Like, that's exactly what you want from Prince. It's purple vocals. And it's because it is loudness, but towards the brighter end of that. And now we have a rating. And the rating is CE. So I'm going to mark that as such. I'm going to show you what I've gotten to, because at this point I have nearly half of my 1,104 library rated. But the more interesting thing about that is I have Senu. I can use Senu. I can load it in here. And then it will be included in this, and you can see what it does. You're like, remember how I was using Golden Slew to control brightness of things? Let me move the selection back because I'm not looping it anymore. And you know what I can do? I can play something that I can let you hear rather than playing that. I have rated that, that's fine. But I should have something in here. How about our old favorite alien kittens? So now we have Senu. Notice how the high frequencies are clipping, although most of them are sitting around here. What's this? We have unclipped them. I have better things to demonstrate this with. Senu is using a sine-formed slew clipper. This is what it sounds like. It's an incredibly good slew controller. By the time you make it sound kind of huge and crunchy, and you notice that it's still clipping. Like we're all in the low bass now. The slew is completely obliterated at this stage, but the low frequencies and loudness is still fully there. Let's find an even more appropriate. If we can, I think maybe we have to close the whole effect stack. Let's restart the program. It's giving me fits. So what can I use? How about this? We know this. And I'll do the same thing of firing up the effect stack. And then I'll do the same thing of adding Senu to it. But in this one, you're going to see more of what it's doing. I'm going to loop the playback for now. Let's stop it for long enough to move Senu to the top of the screen there and get it so that I can control it. So our highs aren't all that excessive here. We can fix that. I have other plugins that I can use to fix that. Let's try a little Air 3. And we'll move Air 3 up here before even getting to Senu. And we've got both of those in a line now. And we'll put the body of the sound more or less about normal like that. Let's make it bright. Oh, we killed it. See, here's one of the things that I discovered And nope, still ain't working. I'll turn it off and turn it on. Nope, still not happy. I'll remove it and re-add it. Turns out Senu can't handle being overdriven. I'm going to move the, and you can see the amount of clip there is because Senu went crazy. Without it, this is what we've got. In fact, now we've got it so it's showing those red dots where I usually would find them if I had something that was over bright. That's because I want to show you what this will do. Let's find out if I can re-add Senu. But remember how I said I had to do something. We're going to add one more plugin, which I needed to include in my mastering plugin to be able to make any of this work. And that would be Clip Only 2. Air is providing peaks that are so hot they're making Senu blow up, which is probably why it didn't find a lot of favor. Senu probably didn't find success because it could blow up on people, and so they tried it a couple of times, had it cut out, and went, oh, I don't want any more of this, which probably means I could do with a bug fix update on that, but that's another story. Let's see if it works now. If not, I will save it and restart the program. Ah! Okay, so now we have a extremely bright signal that's going all the way into this stuff down here. And we have Senu. And Clip Only 2 is stopping it from being broken. Watch this. We made it be a line down here. And we made it even darker. And we can scooch it back up. Now we're just taking the top edge off it. So if we fiddle with this right, we can get it so it uses the slew clipping, which I didn't realize also needed regular clipping on top of it, to make a hard limit on how bright the slews can go, even when we have the body of it being as aggressive as this. And even if we pull the rest of the sound down to be rather quiet, we can make a little high frequency zone where it's just blasting us with highs, but never to the point of being annoying and doing overslew down here. And see, here's where it starts getting really interesting. And this is in the mastering program, but you'll never be able to use it without Hit Record Meter. And the mastering program doesn't do what people consider mastering these days. But consider this. Supposing we have just a bunch of high frequencies, and it's just a bunch of high frequencies, and you're able to slew clamp them, or maybe the high frequencies go a little bit too far. So you want to control this and take these out, but you also want it to be a useful, balance to produce a useful shape. And again, you have Air, you have Clip Only already. You have Senu. And what Senu does is you can do this, but that just makes a line, and you don't necessarily want a line. What you maybe want to do is be able to scale everything down so that it starts at the same place, which would be around here, I guess. See where the red lines, the red dots go? It kind of starts from here. If you took the output of this and ran it through a dry wet, it works like a ratio control in a compressor, which means you could have it be full crank like this, or you could have it be completely, and I don't have a dry wet in Senu. Now I'm wishing I did. But you can also do the zero dry wet, which would be letting all of the frequencies back through again, and now you've got your clipping. But if you do just a little bit of the dry wet, you're effectively changing the ratio to something that's kind of starting at here. This is effectively the same as having an infinite ratio on something that's acting like a limiter, but if you combined it with a dry wet, you can dial it down until the highs are filling up like maybe the space between there and there without a hard line, but just compressing those peaks down into the range that you might want. And it's not that dissimilar to stuff that you can do. Let's get density out. Here's density, and I can let this be played audibly. We know what this is. So density 0 is relatively dry, but density 1 is quite saturated. So look at what happens to where specifically the peaks are. Not so much the slews, and it shouldn't affect the zero crosses that much. Peaks are up here. If we distort, we went louder. We're clipping more, and all of the dots are closer to the top edge. This fails to do the novelty thing that Meter likes to look for, but it makes everything louder. It's distorting. It's just a soft clip rather than a hard clip. So by contrast, and we'll reset this. If we do negative density, so that weird sound is being produced by an algorithm that is all about leaning the sound out. It's similar to what I have done with the plugin PyWhackit. PyWhackit uses this. And this is only one stage of it, so it sounds kind of janky. But look at what happened to the field here. It's probably not practical to take something that is this dense with peaks and squish it down in this way, because what's happening is anything that's lower than that is being squished down even further. In fact, I should be able to demonstrate that by selecting a different part of the sound. Let's give it a try. There we are. So that is the normal drum intro, and it is filling up the entire range of peaks like that. If I go to 1 point density or beyond, it'll become louder, and you'll see what happens to the peaks. mostly it's making the high peaks get even louder. But then if we do the opposite, going real far into negative density, now the way this works, it doesn't sound nice, but it has forced all of the peaks here to go like 12 to 18 dB down from what they were. It's trying to make the quietest sounds go quieter. It's still allowing the loud peaks to be there, although I've set it up so that for the mastering plugin, it's making the loudest peaks, in fact, go louder so that it can keep the total range a little bit wider. But you can see how it's spread out a little bit more. These are not things I'd be able to do by ear. It's difficult to hear peaks by ear, but making subtle changes with them. Like, let's take it back to closer to just 1, like that. Then fire it up again, and we're going to go not as far, not nearly as far. Let's stick to about 0.5, which should be not really enough to hear very clearly, a little over 0.5, but we probably can see a change. Oh yeah, no, it's like over 6 dB a change. So in doing that, and then we can also do the opposite, add 0.5. So that little change in density, which is a sine processing, but also a 1 minus cosine processing, is able to shift. And again, look at the peaks. Don't look at these other meters because they're not that changed, although the slew does appear to be changing. We can make the quiet parts of the sound noticeably drop down like 6 dB. By the time you get down here, the lines that are 6 dB apart are very close together. So we're really cutting the quiet parts of the sound. And then as we go to increasingly densify it, everything's getting pushed up towards clipping without actually clipping. It's able to make the spots on there go more aggressive. And in fact, long as I do content hiding, I can go and dig up something that I know will be, let's see, some of these ones are rather dark. So I'm looking for a extremely dark, police would work as well, but I'm thinking in terms of classic Genesis. In particular, I'm thinking of some of the really punchy and, because this is my list as I currently have it. I think that's gone too loud already. Let's research. So all of these were so quiet that they did not even register. As were these police tracks. All of this stuff is the stuff that ended up so quiet it didn't register on meter at all. And so is all this. Weirdly, Dead Mouse's Strobe, which was once one of the loudest tracks, turned into one of the quietest tracks here, but that's because it's trying to track novelty. And Strobe is fairly static in arrangement. Let's see. There we go. Here is a track where if I turn on Content Hide D, I should be able to get away with it just fine. We will turn on meter. Look at what's going on here. Ooh. As long as I'm at that, let's also quickly add Air 3. And quickly move it to be up on the top there because we're going to use it to gain stage as well as brighten. When I get the mastering plugin, it's going to have all this stuff built into it. For now, let's move that down so that you can still see these. You can probably hear which song this is. Notice how we are not actually clipping any of this stuff, although we could. So if we just boosted volume, we can just make it so everything got moved up, but that's not what we want. We don't want to just clip all the loudest peaks and have them be gone, which is what these lines mean. It will give you a more modern days kind of sound. And again, their RMS is even quieter than this. The peaks are going down to -18 on this track. So let's see what we can do about that. And we're actually still, like, watch this. So here's no boost on air and no boost on density. This is what the peaks only of this track look like off of the original vinyl record. It's sitting around almost never getting to full loudness, and the quietest parts of it drop right, like the peaks are going down to 24 dB down. And again, you can just distort everything, and then everything goes up to there. But what we want to do, rather than simply distorting it, is squish it upwards without narrowing that so much. I'm going to reset that. So here's where we're currently starting. First thing we can do is add some brightness. So let's add some brightness until we are overslewing. You'll notice we still don't have that much of a cloud, but we were able to make the green dots mostly go away by just cranking the treble. We'll uncrank it half a bit. We can add a little teeny bit of overall gain increase, but not so much that we can't have these peaks up here. So now we have a setup where the track has been brightened. It's been turned up to where the loudest peaks are hidden, but the distribution is not right. Because all these peaks are sitting down very quietly. A lot of them are like 12 dB down. You don't have to be the Beatles and have it all sitting between 0 and 6 dB, but this is not making effective use of its peaks. So we're gonna do a little bit more boosting, not much though. And now we kick into density, which is not unlike what's going to be in Zoom. This is where I got the idea for Zoom. This is the positive use of it. And we'll restart it. We're going to restart this too. And then we start adding density, and the lower parts are going to move up and the higher parts are not going to move up as much because it is a soft clip. It is a sine-based transfer function. And it works like this. And now that we've done that, we could probably... Oh, no, we can't, can we? Or can we? We can do it after the density. Remember how I said I can use Senu, but Senu breaks if you clip it, which is a good reason for me to maybe go and readdress it. Well, here it is again. Let's see if it blows up and dies. But what I can do is put it after density. Density is clipping. Density is not going to be giving me anything over 1 or minus. It's not going over 0 dB. If you go over 0 dB, Senu breaks. It was a wild experiment quite a while ago, and I'm still learning about it. And now that I've done that, we will very quickly find out whether I can even use Senu in this context. But if I can, signs point to I can't, or can I? No, content ID. So we could squish Senu until everything is very distorted. But what it's really for is being used in this careful way and we can dial it back just a hair. And now we have high frequency spikes that are hovering here in the slew meter. Again, the sequence here is air 3, then density. Density is clipping, and that's important. And then Senu. You can't do Senu unless you've clipped it to 0 dB. But Senu is what is stopping the high frequencies from getting grating. And so what we have here, I wonder if I can run it into SWB audio capture. Let's find out. I can't play it for you in an extended way, but I can let you hear little snippets of this before I leave for the day, if this works. I think... see, how do I go about doing this? I remember I had to change it to something in back, and then SW capture would register. In theory, this will register. Haha. So now I... But this is what we were shooting for. And that would be what I'd call a remix, a remaster of the really old Misunderstanding off of the vinyl. And it might be funny hearing it only in bursts, but I will post a full video of this once I get all of this working in the master plugin. I think I have over brightened it, by the way. Oh, I can tell I've over brightened it. Why? Because I have bright 24 and dark 18. Although I am actually not hearing it. Let's adjust all of this stuff and see if we can't. We'll fire it back up again. And so this would be my idea of trying to do a remastering of a classic vinyl record in such a way that people can actually hear what's good about it. The previous version of this was like this. Which is very cool. But you can also, and you see it's not even registering on the meter. That's because it's just too mellow and quiet. So that'll be remastering Chris style. And that's what I'm developing this plugin to be able to do, so that I can do it for these records that I would like to show off in such a way that people will get the idea of what's so exciting about them. And as you can see, within 20 seconds, it has nailed the AA rating, because this track had that available in it. And it's still very chill. It's making, like, this is what you want to be able to do. Just make the clouds of peaks and stuff. Bright 19%. Dark. Well, now it's 18%. It's going brighter. And that's the idea of what I'm trying to do with this stuff. So as you can see, upcoming plugins. Also, we can take a minute to look at what the biggest hits are. I'll show you that. This will tell you something about what Airwindows meter likes in music. So if you do stuff that it likes and appreciates, this is where that will go. Gonna close that window. Yep. Well, the mastering plugin is designed in every way about being able to manipulate peaks. Every single thing about it is about manipulating stuff that is not immediately obvious to the ear and adjusting it through using Airwindows meter to dial in a spectacularly pleasing sound. I think that will work. I think that is entirely correct, but we're still dealing with peaks. People will tell you that you can't hear peaks. You can hear peaks, but it's certainly not as easy to hear as like RMS. There is a reason why people lost interest in dealing with it. So here's the kind of stuff that the new version of meter likes best. We've got Ace of Base, All That She Wants, wildly outperformed all the other Ace of Base tracks. Often it is the first track that breaks an act that shows up here in the top. I don't think you necessarily want to always make everything be double A. Like first track on your album, probably a good idea to go with that. For bigger sales, notice that we don't have that many like top 10 or top 25 hits. We scroll down a ways, down to like BD, and here's a bunch more. Here, Sweet Judy Blue Eyes showed up as BD. Keep going. Here's another cluster of top 10, top 25, and top 100 hits. And they continue. You still get them even as far down as here. Funnily enough, I measured all the Police albums, and the meter likes Stuart Copeland. It likes all the earliest Police, and it would probably like Copeland's band Clark Kent. And it likes all of the Sting controlled Police tracks much less. And that's because not everything is about novelty, startlement, and being audacious and getting your attention. But yeah, we've got Ace of Base. There is a particular B-52s track that the meter just loves. It loves 52 Girls. I have no idea why, but it got really excited and blasted right off the top of the meter. Beastie Boys, Hey Ladies, and Sure Shot. One of those is vinyl and one of those is CD. They both rated as super, super well. And Beastie Boys is very different from Beatles off of Sgt. Pepper, and yet they both rated AA. 2 Sgt. Pepper's tracks in a row rated AA. And oh look, Burial. Some of my UK people will be amused to see that you can have Burial that blows the top right off the meter, even though it's not favoring like bass as much as some of the more loudness-oriented ones are concerned with. Strangely, Eagles' Those Shoes are the ones that Meters likes best. Although, honestly, I like that track as well. It's like the closest they got to a rock and roll track, including Life in the Fast Lane. Elton John's Honky Cat is the most exciting song that it heard from Elton John. That's a very punchy song with horns and stuff. Hot Blooded by Foreigner. Foreigner makes it onto there. Not terribly surprising. This is interesting. James Brown, Ain't It Funky. Ain't It Funky is the track where he first hit on doing a incredibly minimal riff. It's almost a precursor to techno. It's just a guitar going on the same note always, and then like a hat and a snare drum and a very simple little groove, and it just sits there. And then periodically there will be a horn break, and the horn break is where Meter was like, okay, now I'm paying attention. But this song is noted as the first appearance of James Brown getting into his mature style. So that was interesting that Meter registered that. Meter registered Led Zeppelin's first track off of their first album as something special. I'm pretty sure this is the song that broke them. And again, this is good at being able to find stuff to break an act. This is probably the track that broke the Fix, unless it was the other big hit that they had, Saved by Zero. This is not a track that broke XTC, but it's its favorite XTC track. Astral Traveler was a early big hit for Yes, even though Time in a Word didn't chart. Also Time in a Word. It just loves some of the Time in a Word tracks, and I'm pretty sure the reason for this is the bass and drums and the arrangement. And Yes would do these really complicated arrangements. Here's a Beatles track that always grabs your attention, even though it's very cheesy. Another Foreigner. Pink Floyd's highest rating track for Meter is Several Species of Small Furry Animals Gathered Together in a Cave and Grooving with a Pict. I'm not making that up. That's just what Meter says. I think it's the drumming and beat and all the weird shrieking and stuff and the reverb. But for whatever reason, this is Pink Floyd's biggest hit as far as this one is concerned. This is Robert Palmer's biggest hit, Looking for Clues. Goes like right to the top of the charts as far as Meter is concerned. A couple of Police songs, Man in a Suitcase, which I quite like. And When the World is Running Down, You Make the Best of What's Still Around. And another XTC. Zappa's 1971 band with Flo and Eddie singing Happy Together. Is that wild and enthusiastic? Funnily enough, ZZ Top's Give Me All Your Loving is the highest rated ZZ Top track that it was able to find. That's interesting because Eliminator was a huge album for them. So Meter seems to agree. Here's some more Sgt. Pepper. Sgt. Pepper is all over this Meter. Here's Creedence breaking out with Susie Q. That was, in fact, a breakout hit for them. James Brown, The Payback, which is a big deal for James Brown fans. Robert Palmer with Gary Newman. I kid you not. Robert Palmer did this album collaborating intensely with Gary Newman, and it's a really interesting album. And then immediately below that is one of my favorite tracks, which is the title track off of Robert Palmer's Some People Can Do What They Like. And it's like this funk jam. AC/DC's Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap is its favorite AC/DC track so far, although I could record a bunch of other tracks off of that album and shoot them out, see what shows up. But it is certainly a strong song. Rock Lobster. Barry White's Love's theme is fascinating because what happens when you do this one is it's playing all of this heavy disco sweetness and strings arrangement. It's the one that starts off with strings, and I got one of my live streams like demonetized because I played too much of the string intro. I played like 5 to 8 seconds of the string intro, and that was enough to get busted. So I'm not playing that right now. But I will tell you that it chugs along thinking most of the Barry White track is like C, D, or whatever rated, maybe high C rated. And then the strings cut out and it drops into a bass and drums breakdown. And when it drops into the bass and drums breakdown and gets quieter, Meter puts it up to AD level. It's like, no, this is the really good part. This is the really good part. When the strings shut up and the bass and drums start kicking is when it makes it. And of course, this was a top 10 hit, so maybe people were waiting around for that part. Birthday shows up high. The biggest Devo track is apparently Love Without Anger. One thing about this album from Devo is that when they did this album, they were reamping a lot of stuff. Like a lot of their synthesizers and things were being run through amps, being mic'd in distant rooms and things like that. They were doing a lot of stuff with acoustic space. They were doing a lot of stuff with loudness and volume and reamping synths. I know that about that particular album. And so you might have never heard of this track, but it's a bumping track. It's a pretty upbeat track. More Foreigner, Jukebox Hero. The Jay Giles Band. If you've never heard this song, that's fine. It's Jay Giles Band, I Do. When I was growing up, I lived in the suburbs of Boston, around Lexington. And so I was hearing WBCA and the Rock of Boston and WAAF. And you heard lots of this song. This song was all over the radio. And Meter seems to like it just as much, if not more, than the other stuff. Another James Brown track from the Payback. Spirit of Radio turns out to be the highest rated Rush track off of Permanent Waves, which is the one that I recorded a bunch of tracks off of. Wham's Wake Me Up Before You Go Go is the highest rated Wham track of like 3 that I got, because I got Careless Whisper and another one. Owner of a Lonely Heart, highest rated Yes track. Walk This Way, highest rated Aerosmith track. Another Beastie Boys, another Burial, another Devo track. This one is a good one. Clock Out leads off the sophomore album, Duty Now for the Future, which is an awesome album. That's where the Swelling Itching Brain song came from. It is an amazing album, and this is always a great start to it. It's this rockin', punky sounding song. Led Zeppelin, Whole Lotta Love, of course. Parliament, Give Up the Funk, Tear the Roof Off the Sucker, is the highest rated Parliament track. Peter Gabriel, Sledgehammer, highest rated Peter Gabriel track. More Police, No Time This Time and On Any Other Get Day. It likes the early Police. It likes early Police tracks. Poor Skeleton Steps Out. Roundabout is the second highest Yes track after Owner of the Lonely Heart. Strangely, Bowie's Up the Hill Backwards is what it thinks is Bowie's best track. I wouldn't have called that one, but it is the lead-off track on the album, so that's interesting. And another Burial track, Deadmau5 shows up. Deadmau5's I Remember, which is loud to over loud, where you might want to dial it back. It's also over bright. I could probably make it go to AA by remastering it. I'm more likely to remaster songs that are old in 60s and extremely dynamic and too dark. But I could remaster this to make it score higher. James Brown, First Neil Young, another Parliament. Strangely, Night of the Thumposaurus Peoples was its second favorite. Here's a Police hit, Don't Stand So Close to Me. That's a top 10 hit, and it's not surprising that it's showing up. More Yes, More Yes, More Yes, More Yes. Beatles, Why Don't We Do It in the Road is apparently something that Meter likes. Devo's Satisfaction. The third song is one of their notable songs. And then Doobie Brothers, It Keeps You Running is the first appearance of Doobie Brothers, and apparently Meter thinks that 80s sound that It Keeps You Running has is high scoring. And then I've got a Duran Duran Rio. I don't have the full song because the record has a warped part that was knocking the needle around and stuff, and so I couldn't get the whole thing, but even the partial song scored as a BA. Genesis, old but loud and extremely changeable. Parliament, Pink Floyd's Money. I'm not sure if this is no, it's not the first Pink Floyd that we've seen, because several species of small furry animals gathered together in a cave and grooving with a pick off of the Ummagumma album was the highest scoring Pink Floyd track, but I think this is second highest. This would have been their biggest hit if not for the transcendence of that weird Roger Waters sound effects track. If you know, you know. It's extremely funny that it likes that one so much. More Police. First Tom Petty track is Here Comes My Girl at BA. This is around where we're seeing BA and BB. I still have this theory that if you target like AF to BC or thereabouts, that's where you get the possibility for really ginormous hits. I think you don't target the most exciting possible things. You just keep stuff interesting enough, but you don't push it until it's exhausting. Here's a Van Halen track. All Wait, I believe, was not only a top 25 hit, but it's Meter's pick for their best. Another ZZ Top, Cheap Sunglasses. That is also a big hit. I am aware of that Roger Waters track. He also was working with Ron Geeson on that one. Here's another Aerosmith track, Train Kept a Rollin', which is off of a more obscure album, but I remember this being all over the radio. Back in the day, I was growing up in Boston. Aerosmith is a Boston band, and so I heard what people were requesting from Aerosmith, because they would be doing concerts and stuff, and so the radio stations would blow up with Aerosmith songs, and people would be requesting stuff, and I heard this one a lot. B-52s, more Beastie Boys, more Bowie. Here's another Deadmau5, one that is a lot more dynamic, and here's Depeche Mode. Personal Jesus, also showing up very high on the meter. A Devo. Here's a ginormous Elton John hit, which is rating at BB. All of this is literally as it comes off of the vinyl. These ratings are not me remastering them. I could remaster pretty much any of these and turn it into a AA. Which might also mean that I could remaster things for people and have them be successful. I don't know. But it's fine-tuning what the peaks are doing, basically, is the theory there. But all of this that we're looking at is literally as it comes off of the vinyl with no adjustments. So Benny and the Jets, that's Yellow Brick Road album, and that one is kind of 70s and dark and dynamic, and it still scores very high. As does Flashdance What a Feeling, which is super 80s, and that's a lot brighter. Jackson 5, Led Zeppelin. Ozzy's Mr. Crowley, I believe, outranks Crazy Train. And then Robert Palmer, which you probably haven't heard of this song, but it rated well. More ZZ Top, more Van Halen, more Ace of Base. B-52s. Beatles' Tomorrow Never Knows. It went from being like number one of the loudest possible song to extremely low because it's extremely samey. It doesn't change. Nothing happens in this song. It just keeps droning on. But it drones on effectively enough to rate as high as BC, unaltered. Boston Shows Up, More Than a Feeling, and Smokin'. Bowie's Golden Years, Starman, and Stay all are sitting in the same range. Golden Years is a top 10 hit. More Than a Feeling is a top 10 hit. Cheap Trick, more Devo, including Whip It, which is their biggest hit. Eagles Shows Up. They were already up at AA, if I'm not mistaken, with Those Shoes. But this was their introduction. Take It Easy was their breakout hit. Oh, no. The track called Payback that is the proto-hip-hop song, that's James Brown. I'm quite happy that this meter is really excited about James Brown in Parliament. Mind you, it's not overweighting them. It's about equally excited with them and, say, the Eagles and so on. But no, Snub Dog, you need to be looking to James Brown for the Payback. Yeah, and then the Zappa is Happy Together off of Mother's Live at the Fillmore 1971. Edgar Winter Frankenstein, that's always a favorite, and that shows up in BC. Led Zeppelin's How Many More Times is like proto-Led Zeppelin, even though it is already Led Zeppelin. But How Many More Times is doing that sort of Yardbirds thing in the end, where they're just making a giant pile of noise. More Parliament, a couple of Peter Gabriel tracks, another Robert Palmer that didn't actually chart as far as I can tell, but Meter likes Robert Palmer's sound. He does well. Palmer really does. Yeah, Payback from James Brown. Robert Plant, In the Mood. That's a classic. Police, XTC doing Snowman. More Yes. More Zappa. Beatles. And again, more Sgt. Pepper's. There's a reason Sgt. Pepper's is such a big deal. It's all over this meter. And of course, All You Need Is Love. More Burial. Pirates is off of his first album. Untrue is off of his album Untrue, which was his big hit. Cheap Trick, that's a big song. Although it doesn't go to double A because it's just not dynamic enough. Cheap Trick is more like compressed and a big roaring thick sound, although I could remaster it to be a double A and hit a little harder. Crosby, Stills, and Nash. With Crosby, Stills, and Nash, in order to make that rate higher, I would be turning down the bass. Because Stephen Stills has this like P-bass on there, along with all of the singing, and the bass is just resonant and is dominating everything. Doesn't really need to be that intense. Donald Fagen, Eagles rock track. More James Brown off of the Payback album. Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins, more Robert Palmer, track that you've never heard of. That's because the sound of the track and the groove of the track and the way that Robert Palmer belts is as good as anything he usually does. The song isn't that good. These will still suffer if the song is just garbage. I won't say that it's garbage, but it's just not that good of a song. Rush, The Police, Van Halen. Van Halen's breakout hit was Running with the Devil. So that shows up along with 1984 Jump, which is a top 10 hit, and Unchained, which I made a video on. More Wham, more XTC. Here's the other track from Yes off of 90125. Mama Kin off of Aerosmith's second album. More Beatles, which that's also another Sgt. Pepper track. There's a reason why Sgt. Pepper is as big as it is. Bowie. Here's more of that stuff. This should be double A. Genesis, Home by the Sea should be double A, but I'll show you why it's not. And pretty soon I'm going to go and make dinner and finish doing the compiling stuff for Raspberry Pi and continue the work that I was doing. But if I take this is the track I was telling you about. And we have silenced it, although I can let Content ID in. So what this is doing is being just insanely dynamic. So like it sounds fantastic, but there is so much range, and I could certainly, like I did with the other one, pump it up a bit. This song should be a AA, and it's not. It's made it up to like B. Oh, it's rated actually higher than the last time I checked. The meter is somewhat wibbly and wobbly, and I'm never quite sure what it's going to do, other than show me the dots correctly. But as far as the rating is concerned, I think it gets dizzy. But here's what we're looking at with that one: is it was a ginormous hit. In fact, well, no, it wasn't that ginormous of a hit, but it was from a record that was a ginormous hit. But they remixed it, and one of the reasons they remixed it was because there were things lacking about what they were doing with it. When you have the RMS that much under even this, and the peaks are like 30 dB down. The peaks are going to 24 dB down in the middle of the main groove. You don't need to be this dynamic. This is just leaving like fullness on the table. And you can certainly push some of these louder. So that's what I've been doing. The mastering thing is using some of that stuff like density and so on. And you can squish all of this up without clipping just the top off it. You don't have to just slide it up. You can also compress it vertically so that stuff is hitting more in this top range rather than being so spread out that it sounds empty. And same deal with here, same deal with all the brightness. Like you've got high frequencies happening to the point where we're overslewing even turned down this much. It's still overslewing. But I should be able to not only boost that, but also apply a version of Senu and then have a dry wet on that so that I can first put a hard clamp on this and just limit it, and then use the dry wet to scale the amount of that dynamic range that I'm letting back in. And that'll do the same thing as density there. But all of that work is done entirely in the peak and slew realm. I don't know how much my old ears are great at being able to pick up 20 kilohertz and all that kind of stuff, but you know, this is a 96K track, by the way. I do a lot of that stuff by referring to meter. I dial in some of that stuff, and it typically doesn't take very much. By the time you've moved the controls enough where you really hear what it's doing, you've already gone way too far. You can't really hear the difference between having, like Senu, taking out just the overslew part, or wrapping around to where it's over here, or squishing all the way down so that there's a hard limit to slew, which is like right here. It's hard to hear those differences. And that's why meter is there to help you pick that stuff out. And again, here we are with we're still in the B's here. We have to go all the way down to CA to get to Aerosmith Back in the Saddle. And we've got a whole pile of like Tom Petty, Van Halen, the Police, including Police from My God was the highest rating track off of Synchronicity, because Synchronicity, likewise, is so quiet and dynamic that it's not able to express itself in the loud peaks. I could remaster Every Breath You Take. Every Breath You Take lives, let's see. I don't think it's quite in QT because I'd see it here. There's Synchronicity 2. Yeah. Every Breath You Take ranks FC. I could remaster it to have it register as AA almost immediately. And if I put it on the YouTubes, I will. But that's why I'm doing this mastering thing that I'm not going to let people get right away, because I got a lot of other stuff to put out. You see all the other stuff that I have to put out first, including things like you haven't heard Pop 3. Pop 3 is my next big compressor. You haven't heard Stonefire Comp. Stonefire Comp is Stonefire, but with the compression that's in Console X. I got to put out Zoom. I got to put out Seriously 3. Seriously 3 is an upgrade. So there's a lot of stuff, and I can scroll this. Like we've also got biquad high-low. We've got cans. I did cans. You haven't got cans yet. Here's the Console X stuff. Here's Galactic 2 and Galactic 3. I certainly can't right now because it's time for me to go and have dinner. But yeah, here the reason I had to do a mastering that is only for me to use for the time being, because it's too daunting and difficult for anybody else to use most likely, is because the police rates on meter legitimately as FC, which is almost beneath notice. And a bunch of these are like that just because they are not dynamic enough or they are not bright enough. Here's Led Zeppelin Stairway to Heaven at FB. That can't possibly be right. But this particular recording of it is really, really dark and really, really dynamic. And you're not getting any brightness and sparkle and shimmer or anything like that. You're not getting any of what you would want to get from that stuff. And I can very likely take Led Zeppelin Stairway to Heaven and remaster it so that it will be AA rated. Maybe not, because it's the whole idea of Stairway to Heaven was that it was going to be a smooth, steady build from very, very quiet to very, very loud. And I might be able to tweak it in such a way that the dark versus bright balance ends up correct at the very end of the song, meaning that most of the song will just not rate very high, and then it'll start building and building as it keeps going, and it would end hitting AA. That might be possible to do, but I can't post that because Led Zeppelin won't let you post their stuff. Certainly not that one. But yeah. So this is me checking in. As you can see, I've got some irons in the fire and some new stuff to do. A lot of this work is being done because I wanted to start working with mastering so that I could know what I could do with it. I was showing you with a host of other plugins. None of them are really quite perfectly balanced to do it. And because I have the Galactic 2 update, which stops it from having a bug, and Galactic 3. And with Galactic 3, I finally have updated Galactic in such a way where I think it's like literally genuinely better. And the reason I say that is because it's exactly the same sound as Galactic and exactly the same as Galactic in every way except for it has D-Res. And D-Res is kind of similar to the way that I was doing the undersampling in the original Galactic. But the original Galactic is using a undersampling that is linear rather than reconstructing stuff on a Bezier curve, which is what the new undersampling does. And with it, you can't fool with it. And with the new version, you can use the same Galactic sound, but you can drop the sample rate further with a completely smooth sound to it, so that the space size is that much bigger, or you can just tell it to be, make it double size and then make the size of it be half again, and you get the same sound back, but instead you would have a low-pass sound where it's acting like it has a brick wall filter, except not exactly, because the Bezier filter doesn't really work like that exactly. And the nice thing about it is that using it normally, if you're running it at like 96K or heaven forbid 192, the original one would work even at 192 as designed, but it would reconstruct the sound rather than with a Bezier curve reconstruction. It would reconstruct the sound with linear, which is kind of like crunch coat. And when you do that, I think the highs aren't as nice. I just don't think the highs are as nice when it's throwing a lot of sharp corners into things. And the original Galactic does that at high sample rates, but Galactic 3 doesn't. In fact, Galactic 3 could handle any sample rate you give it, no matter how crazy. quite naturally and sounding exactly the way that it should. Plus, if you run a higher sample rate, you actually get more granularity with the undersampling. Like you'd be able to pick the low pass cutoff point more finely. And dialectical spectacle, as far as I know, there is not a grading chart for meter. Instead, basically just take it as read that if you are using it, it will assign a letter grade and is mostly about how exciting it thinks the track is. And you don't always want to go for the maximum possible score because a lot of successful records have been rated at like BC or lower and worked out just fine. Although in the modern day, I honestly can't imagine people not shooting for high scores with it. Beats loudnating. But yeah, there is no chart. It is just, it does its thing and it'll give you its best guess as to what is going on and why. So on that note, I am going to bid you adieu, go off and make probably a chicken curry. Oh, no. No, that's no longer the grading chart for meter. That's the grading chart for the original version. There is no longer a grading chart like that. In fact, that is being shown in the interface on that line of text where it says loudness, : it will assign a grade for that, and you can still read that. And then it'll assign a grade for novelty, and that will hopefully also be useful. And then the large letters grade is just its take on how big of a hit it thinks the thing is, which doesn't make it right. It's only operating within its context. But there is no chart for that anymore because it's just kind of, it's doing its best. Put it that way, it's doing its best. And with that, I'll probably see you folks next on the weekend when I put out Galactic 3 and update Galactic 2. Although Galactic 2 is already updated if you use Consolidated, like re-download Consolidated, and it will be working now under all circumstances. On that note, I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.